bottom line is there's a lot that we control. My favorite line about genetics is that genetics load the gun, but your actions and habits pull the trigger. So you get to decide what you do with it. If you want to just say, this is the hand I was dealt, oh well, poor me, that's fine. But my preference is taking more of an empowered approach and saying there's a lot of things that I can do and I can control, and I'm going to see how far I can take it.
This is the Alden Report.
Folks, before we get into our next guest, I'm super excited about our latest program. Look, we've been on television for close to 20 years, literally selling hundreds of millions of dollars worth of products and services that have had a positive impact on people's lives. We've created millionaires. If you've ever watched television, you've most likely seen me on television, not dressed like this, but in a suit and a tie. Listen, we've re-engineered the process. We're allowing people, a small group of people, whether you're an author, whether you're a business coach, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you have a program or a service that you feel as though that can have a positive impact on people's lives, and you want to up-level your game. You know, you're tired of what's going on social media. You're tired of AI is not kicking in. You're tired of all the money that you spent and you're not seeing any return. You're tired of all these fraudsters out there that tell you they're going to put you in Huffington Post or USA Today or Forbes, and it's nothing just but a joke. You want to be in front of millions of people every single day all over the country. Folks, we've been doing it for 20 years. We've re-engineered the process. We've made it possible for the average everyday person to participate in this. If you want to up-level your game, if you truly want to build your profile, if you truly want to get in front of millions of people every single day, send me a direct message at Mike Alden 2012. You'll see it on the bottom of the screen, at Mike Alden 2012, and put TV in the message, and I will get back to you personally and see if you're a good fit for us. Again, send me a direct message at Mike Alden 2012. Send me the message TV, and we'll see if you're a good fit.
This is the Alden Report.
All right, my name is Mike Alden. We are here in the new Blue Bay studio. It's a little bit different. We got my Ask More, Get More book behind me. I still got the 99-cent glasses. The audio might be a little bit different, and we're still kind of working on it, but I'm liking our new space. We still got that backdrop, which is cool. It's a real backdrop, but I'm excited to talk about what we're going to talk about next. We're going to be talking about peak performance. We're going to be talking about nutrition. We're going to be talking about health. We're going to be talking about wellness. And for those of you who've been following me on Instagram, I've been kind of leaking some things about me and some of the things that I'm doing. In fact, my guest doesn't even know this. I didn't even want to tell him because I want to talk about it live on the show. My next guest is Mike Millner. Mike's been helping people not only get better with their brain, but also with their body as well. He's been doing it for a long time. He's been helping people all over the world. And if that's you, right? And it's me, by the way, that's why I'm excited to have him, because I want to know about what he's doing, how he's helping people as well. So a lot of times we do this podcast kind of for a selfish reason, because I want to know this stuff. So if I want to know it, I'm sure you want to know about it as well. Please help me welcome Mike Millner. Mike, thanks for being here, man.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Let me first apologize again publicly for one. I had to cancel the first one, and then we're running a little bit late in this one. But let me just tell you why first, and tell you why I was late. So I've been on my own fitness journey myself, and man, I'm really going to commit to what I'm about to say. So I'm 47, and I decided 7 weeks ago that I am going to compete in a men's physique show. So that's why this is a bit of a selfish reason to be here, because I started thinking about my weight and my age and all these other things. And I'm like, you know what, man, I better get a hold of it now. So let's just jump right into that part of it. We're into the new year, depending on when this airs, we're not really sure. But either way, we're into 2023, and we always see it in January where everybody goes to the gym and tries to get healthy, and then they usually give up. But let's talk a little bit about those New Year's resolutions, which I think a lot of times are just kind of a waste of time anyway. But let's talk about when this time of year, when people start to say, well, you know what, I want to get healthy now. Why do they wait?
Yeah, it's a great question. For some reason, we need a wake-up call of some kind, and that can be the calendar changing. Like nothing really changed from December 31st to January 1st, except for some numbers changing. And or there's like a health scare or some kind of a situation where, I've had clients who said it was, oh, I had a scare at the doctor's office, or I went to play with my kids and, I was on the ground. I had a hard time getting back up, or I walked up the steps and I recognized I was out of breath. And there's that like wake up call. Sometimes there's just some kind of trigger that needs to happen for people to wake up. And it's unfortunate. Like, I read a statistic about the most likely scenario for any kind of change is when something tragic happens, like smokers are more likely to quit after they get diagnosed with lung cancer. People who are overweight are more likely to lose weight after they have a heart attack or some kind of a health concern or scare. So the new year, I guess for some, the holiday season is typically a time where we eat more freely. We're not really getting to the gym. Our routines are thrown off a bit. And then I think there's that, I better get my stuff together. And we set those resolutions. Interestingly enough, the research tells us that resolutions have about an 8 to 9% chance of being successful, which is not very good. However, goals set at other times during the year have about a 4% chance of being successful. So for some reason, when you set that resolution or that goal in the new year, it actually is a higher likelihood of being successful than at other times. Take that for whatever it's worth. Maybe that's a reason to actually set some intentional resolutions and maybe change the approach, because we could get into the whole psychology of why they fail. But the research is clear that setting goals in the new year actually gives you a greater probability, even though the odds aren't that good overall.
Wow. I thought you were actually going to say the opposite, right? Because I recently just posted, this show's never about me, well, a little bit, but, I just recently posted, I was down in Florida about, the whole New Year's resolution. And I think most of it is for people who are, procrastinators and they just like looking for something. And I got some pushback. Actually, I got some people kind of like giving me shit about it, and I just fired back. And I was like, well, my whole thing is, why wait, right? Like, what are you waiting for? Okay, if you want to get healthy, why wait to January 1st? If you want to quit smoking, like, why are we waiting to January 1st? You want a better job, you want more money, like, well, I don't understand why we're making more money. So yeah, let's talk about the psychological aspect of it. It's interesting. Again, I thought you were going to say the opposite, but I guess it kind of makes more sense to me. Why is it that why do we wait?
Yeah, so I think, well, I completely agree with you. I don't think that there's any reason to wait. I think that if you want something, there's the old adage, which is like the best time to plant a tree was 50 or 100 years ago. The second best time is today. And I wholeheartedly believe that. I think that, a great recipe for failure is to push things off till tomorrow, to push things off till next week, to say, I'll do it when ... So my belief is that there isn't a valid reason to wait. There is just something about a fresh start. I think that there's this psychological component of that reset button. Like, we all wish we had this remote control for life where we could rewind, take decisions and do them differently, or fast forward through the hard times, or whatever it may be. And I think there is something about that reset mindset of, it's a new year, it's a fresh start. I get to kind of wipe the slate clean and rewrite the narrative. Now, one thing about humans psychologically is we are really bad at predicting future emotional states, and we're really bad at reflecting back on previous emotional states. So that plays a role when we start to project our New Year's resolutions, because we fantasize about this idealistic version of ourselves that is not reality. And we think about the outcome. We think about how good we'll feel when we lose the 50 pounds, or when we stop smoking, or when we make more money. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. The challenge is that we can't get too caught up into that fantasy, because there's all this work that goes into it in between. The commitment, showing up when you don't want to, putting in the hours at the gym, or prepping food, or whatever needs to happen for you to actually accomplish that goal. Emotionally, you won't be in that same idealistic state that you're in when you fantasize about it. So we have this neurotransmitter called dopamine, and dopamine feels really good when it's released. It gives us that pleasure feeling, and it's really the promise of a future reward. And that's kind of dopamine's job. It gets us to take action. It motivates us to take action. So this promise of a ideal body, this promise of not smoking, this promise of making more money, this dopamine release happens, and it feels really good. And it gets us up and motivated to do something about it. The problem is that it's not going to be there forever. In other words, you're going to wake up one day and you're going to want to, lay in bed instead of going to the gym. You're not going to want to order healthy food. You're going to want to take the convenient fast food option. So we tend to lose sight of that because we get caught up in this fantasy land of how amazing it's all going to be. And then when stuff gets real, when it's actually challenging, that's when we typically see people fall off. They have this idea that they have to be perfect, and then they sabotage themselves. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why we do that and why we start back over. One of them is because we actually go back to that initial starting point of setting a new goal and getting that dopamine release again. So it's like, as I'm on this journey to bettering myself, when it does get hard, rather than pushing through that, rather than keep going, sometimes it's easier to sabotage myself, start at the beginning, and then fantasize again about how amazing I'm going to feel when I reach this goal. And it just starts that dopamine feedback loop all over again.
Wow, man. Like, there's so much to unpack from what you just said. And I had a question even before that, but I want to just jump into the self-sabotage thing because I think so many of us, including myself, we self-sabotage, right? I told you, I just mentioned earlier, I got a couple of different questions about basically some things that I'm going through, right? So when I made this decision to do what I'm doing, I haven't told anybody about it other than, friends. And I didn't post about it on Facebook like everybody does, because I think that sets you up for failure. And I want to talk about that, but I also want to jump right into the self-sabotage thing. Look, I go to therapy. I've been talking about this since my first book, which is 8 years ago, 9 years ago. I don't know. I've been pretty open about my life. And I always wonder, like, why do we sabotage? Like, I'll give you an example. So I'm getting my body fat done tomorrow. And last night at 2:00 in the morning, and I'm eating super clean, by the way, right? I've been posting about that too. I had, I don't know. I didn't go too crazy, but it was probably too much. I should have been eating these calories anyway. I had Cheez-Its at 2:00 in the morning. And as I'm doing it, and I've told this before to people, I feel like I'm an addict. Like, I feel like I know what I'm doing is not good for me, but it's really interesting what you just said. It's almost like I'm doing it so that I can reset, so that I could feel good again. It's fucking crazy what you just said. I've never heard anyone say that before.
Yeah, that's how our brains work. We have one brain, but two minds. And there's always these competing selves. We have the one that wants the end goal, the delayed gratification. And then we have the one that wants instant gratification. And, it all, if you think about just how evolution works, evolution doesn't rebuild or start anew. It builds on the existing software, we'll call it, for lack of a better term. So we evolved to be more of an instant gratification species. Like, we see food in the wild, we need to eat because we don't know when our next meal is coming. We didn't have the convenience of shelves full of food. So when we were hunter-gatherers, it was, okay, I see food, I need to either hunt, gather, and I need to eat because I don't know when my next meal is coming. Same thing with like procreation or really anything that drives dopamine. It was very much just go get it. Then we had this evolutionary process where we developed a prefrontal cortex, which gave us the ability to delay gratification and be more planful and pause and say, you know what, this is something that future me is really going to benefit from. So we kind of have these two competing selves. We have the one that, wants to spend money now, and we have the one that wants to save money. We have the one that wants to eat crap now, and we have the one that wants to be healthy and fit in the long term. So we kind of always have these competing selves. And sometimes the instant gratification self wins. Sometimes we're able to pause and allow our prefrontal cortex to take its time and be like, you know what, this actually isn't what I want. This is not going to feel good. So I'm going to delay the gratification. The really messed up part about dopamine, there's some fascinating studies on this. I called it the promise of a reward because it's not actually satisfying. When people describe it, they've actually set up like electrodes in rats, and they've also done it in humans, where they would stimulate a dopamine response by pulling a lever. And if they allowed the humans to pull the lever to stimulate dopamine, they would do it hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. Like, the people running the studies would actually have to fight with them to shut it down, because and even when they would turn off the machine, they would just keep pulling it and they would hope for another dopamine stimulation. the
Same,
fascinating
that same exact thing with rats themselves as well. They would just
same
same
with
thing. They would just keep. I know the study. They would just keep hitting the lever over and over and over and over again. Yeah, yeah.
it was such a strong impulse that they would give the rats like two directions. They could either go and eat food, which obviously is more beneficial for their survival, or
Right.
they could walk over wires that were electrically charged, so they would actually burn their feet. And they would to go to the lever, and they would choose to burn their feet off so they could get the dopamine stimulation instead of just going and grabbing some food. So the fascinating thing was when they talked to the subjects in the human trials, they kept saying that it didn't feel good. Like it wasn't like this orgasmic experience to pull the lever. It was that they kept thinking the next time would be the time that it did feel good. So it was kind of this messed up like anticipation of pleasure where it didn't give them the satisfaction that they want, but it was like the next time it will. And the reason why that's important is if you've ever found yourself craving a cookie, you've probably been like, ooh, this cookie is going to taste so good. I have a craving for it. You take a bite and it doesn't do anything for you. But because it triggers a dopamine response, you're like, the next bite is the one that will. So it's this false promise of satisfaction. So you take another bite and that didn't do it. So you take another bite. And the next thing you know, you've got 12 cookies down and you're wondering what the hell happened. And then you feel worse about it. Then typically what happens to our
by the way, you just described me. That's what you just did. You just described me. So keep going.
this is the human experience right here.
And by the way, in the 12 too, by the way. So keep
yeah. So then when things get really messed up is we create this negative feedback loop, because the number one emotion that people describe after overindulging on food like chocolate or cookies or whatever your vice is guilt and shame. And that's, if you ask somebody, what was the strongest emotion that you felt after this indulgence? People say guilt and shame. And then the way that they cope with guilt and shame is through something that increases dopamine that makes them feel better. So something like food, or maybe it's alcohol, or maybe it's some other destructive behavior. And that starts a negative feedback loop of, I feel bad and I'm going to use this coping mechanism because I feel bad, but that's actually the thing that keeps making me feel worse. And we have to be able to exit that cycle. You can exit that cycle at any point in time. It just takes awareness, first and foremost, of what's actually happening. And then being able to take a step back and allow your prefrontal cortex some time to catch up so that you're not always acting on impulse, and allowing that instant gratification brain to run the show.
In a second, I want to talk to you about how we can, in fact, exit that feedback loop that is pretty much plaguing every human on the planet in one way or another. Again, we've been on with Mike Millner. I am just blown away already. I hope you are too. And, he's going to give us a lot of answers as well. But if you'd like some more information about Mike, what he's doing and how he can also help you, he works with individuals, he works with companies, he can certainly, help you as well. Just check him out on Instagram. It's coach_Mike_Millner. From there, he has his website and some of the things that he's up to, where you can also learn more about him, what he's doing. If you've been listening up to this point, you can obviously tell that he's what we would say from Massachusetts, wicked smart. Definitely knows his stuff. It's obvious that he does. And again, he's been helping people. He's been doing it for a long time. We haven't got too much into his background, but his background is pretty diverse as well. So again, if you'd like some more information, also, of course, if you're listening up to this point, make sure you subscribe, like, share, do all that stuff you're supposed to do. Support us on Patreon, do all that stuff you're supposed to do with podcasts, so that we can continue to grow and bring people like Mike on the podcast. All right, so this feedback loop, the answer, so to speak. I'm a avid reader. I've written a bunch of books as well, and I try to learn and try to get better and try to just improve, and it's a struggle, right? Like anything. For instance, like in the book The Power of Habit, right, we talk about habit, and that's kind of what you're talking about. I hear different studies and different research, but we're talking really about, if we want to get out of this negative feedback loop, we got to change our habits. How do we do that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And just to correct you, everybody gets my name wrong. It's 2 L's in my last name, Millner. That's okay. Every single time somebody.
Hold on. It'll be in the notes. So it's Millner. Really? Yep. Okay. All right. My bad, dude. Look at me.
No, it's all good. It literally happens every time. So you're certainly
Millner. Anyway, it'll be in the notes anyway. My bad. All right, keep going. So, all right. So, So how do we get out? How do we change our habits, man?
Yeah, it's funny because most research would say also that your habits don't go away, that your default behaviors don't really go away, that we just are able to upgrade them and make more choices in alignment with who we want to become or what we want to achieve. Because typically what happens is when most people go on this journey for better health, or they want to make more money, or they want to grow as an individual, they think that once they establish the new habit, that all of their old habits just disappear. And that's not the case. It's kind of programmed where our brains are really good at becoming efficient. We have these neurons that communicate with each other. And the more that we, execute a habit, the more efficient our brain becomes at that communication. So when you start a new habit, it's kind of like you're developing. I always use the analogy of riding a bike on a dirt path. The first time that you ride that bike, it's not going to leave much of a divot. But if you ride that same path, a million times, now it's going to be a pretty steep divot. So if I want to let's say it's a negative habit, and I've already got that really deep divot from riding my bike over that dirt path so many times, and then all of a sudden I take a different path. It's not like the first time I take that path, I'm never going to go back into that divot again. It's still there. It didn't disappear. It's still there. Right. So it's this active and conscious choice, which is why it is a challenge, because you have to be able to pause and assess, why am I doing this in the first place? And I think that one of the biggest mistakes that people make is they fail to define exactly why it is that they're doing what they're doing. And, I would ask you that question for yourself when you have this goal, which is a lofty goal to be able to compete. What does that mean to you?
You call me out. You just telling me, did you just call me fat? I think you just called me fat. He just called me
fat. I'm saying you have to.
It's a lofty goal, Mike, you fat fuck. No, I'm like,
for anybody. I've never stepped on stage. I've never competed. I've done photo shoots where I've gotten to, 6-7% body fat, but I've never gotten to the level of stepping on stage. And I know the discipline and the commitment and how on point you really need to be to get there.
Right.
And it's not just, for anybody to jump in. So regardless of the level that you're trying to achieve, I always want to understand the why behind that. What does that mean to you? Why is it important? And that's something that has to be revisited. I think sometimes people are so afraid.
Let's go over it. Let's use me as a case. Let's I've never done this before. If you don't mind, I don't know. Fuck it. Let's do. So let's assume for a second that I'm one of your. Again, I'm just trying to get shit for free. I don't know now. Let's just do a quick little thing. Let's just use me as an example. So I'll just tell you a little bit, and then let's see if we can make me better.
Yes,
so I'm
sure.
47. I'll be 48 in February. I have like I would say a pretty perfect body type for like a linebacker type guy. And also I think as far as symmetry, whether I'm fat or skinny, but I've never really been skinny, I'm able to pretty much distribute pretty well my whole body, And I just decided at 47 that I don't have a bucket list. I've done a lot of cool shit in my life. I just don't. Like, I don't want to jump out of a plane. I got no interest in some other things. And for me, this is what I've wanted to do. I just never had the time, right? I'm always too busy, or I get this going on, I get that going on. I'm like, man, I'm just running out of time. So for me, it is a lofty goal. And also for me, because I think it's just who I am. I'm not going to be, I don't know, maybe I will compete in Mr. Olympia and the Masters. I don't know. But I just always look at things and I kind of want to just be at the top of that, right? Like I did stand-up comedy and I did it for years, and I ended, I performed all over the country, and including the LA, improv, and I, kind of took it to like a level where people thought I was having a nervous breakdown, in my books and the same thing. So I'm just a kind of a type A personality. My why? I think that's really it. Like, I just want to prove to myself that I can do it.
Yeah, that's
totally. Is that normal? Valid. Is that normal?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. If you just want to see what you're capable of, you want to see how far you can push yourself, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So my follow-up question would be, what will it feel like for you to step on stage when you get to that goal? What will that feel like for you?
Yeah, it's interesting that you're asking that too. I'm glad. So I have this vision of me on stage, but I don't have a feeling about it yet. Like, I can see myself on stage. I haven't thought about winning. Like, my coaches are like, "Oh, we're gonna, you're gonna win this thing." I know I'm going to be competing against guys that have done TRT and stuff like that. So it might be difficult. I'm not doing that stuff, which is testosterone replacement therapy for those who don't know. And so for me, I think it would be a kind of a triumphant moment of like, kind of like, again, when I started doing stand up, I got to a point where I was pretty good. I was performing all over the place. I wasn't really getting paid for it, but I was pretty good. And I guess like I said, got on stage at LA Improv, and then I had a set. I had like a 10-minute set. I did it at a charity event, and I killed. And then that was it. I was done. I'm like, I accomplished it. So I don't know what it's going to feel like, but I can see myself doing it.
Okay. Is there anybody that you admire or love or respect that you think about them being proud of you when you accomplish that, that moment of stepping on stage, or is it purely for you?
Yeah, it's purely for me, man. Like, in fact, a lot of people in my life have questioned it, and those people kind of piss me off. And those people are usually family members, right, or loved ones, because they just don't understand it. And I'm getting a little emotional about it because that bothers me a lot.
Does that fuel any of the desire to do
it?
Yeah.
It's like I want to be like, fuck you. Like, all right, you don't,
Yeah. Yeah. And is there any part of you that wants to prove it to yourself as well?
I most of it does. Yeah. Yeah. Because it's like with business, right? We reached a peak that most businesses will never do. And same in my books. But I didn't get the New York Times in my books. I got everything else, Wall Street, USA Today, blah, 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 blah. And that was a bit of a letdown for me. A lot of other people and a lot of other authors, like, I mean, I'm definitely in the top 1%, but at the same time, I'm like, man, I want to, I want to do more. But for me, yeah, it does drive me and fuel me. Negative people and negative comments, I take them, I absorb them. It does bother me. I think if anybody says it doesn't, I think they're lying. But then I really can kind of process it and use it as fuel, if that makes sense.
Perfect. And I'm going to take this in a slightly different direction.
Let's go.
There's going to be a time where you're doing cardio on top of training, and you're counting everything that you're eating, and calories are getting low, and your energy is going to be pretty low. And obviously you're going to be working with people who are going to help you mitigate some of those things, but the inevitable path that you're on, there will be a day, and probably multiple days, where you're hungry, where you're tired, where maybe it's cold outside, where you don't feel like doing your cardio, where you don't feel like, getting some strength training in. Can you picture that moment where you just feel like absolute crap, and the last thing in the world that you want to do is eat well and work out? Can you put yourself in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, I've thought a lot about it. I have friends that are, actually professional bodybuilders, and that what I'm doing, I mean, it's a bodybuilding show, so I'm not doing bodybuilding, men's physique. It's a little bit different. There's a lot of similarities, but I'm not trying to like bulk up. I'm just trying to get cut, right? Yep. So yeah, I can. And in fact, like I said, I was late today because I was actually on the treadmill too long today. For you, someone who you're in this world, I'm 12 weeks out, by the way. And so I was on the treadmill for an hour and a half today, which my trainers are telling me I shouldn't do at this stage in the game, but I did it because I had Cheez-Its last night. So I'm like, I got to make up for this. So yeah, that's the tough part.
Let's use the Cheez-Its example.
Yeah.
Can you envision another situation where maybe it's Cheez-Its, maybe it's something else, and you're just ready to go in and say, screw it?
What do you mean, say screw it, as in like I'm going to screw up?
I'm just going to eat however, like right now, the Cheez-Its look better than my end goal in that moment.
What's weird too, and you mentioned the cookie thing, is that I knew I had a pretty significant calorie deficit. So in my head, mentally, I was like, well, and I know this, and this, a lot of people probably don't. A calorie isn't a calorie, right? But I was saying to myself, well, it's not sugar at 2:00 in the morning. I was like rationalizing the whole thing with myself. It's not sugar, so my insulin probably isn't going to spike as much. Therefore, it's probably not going to store as fat as much. Like, I was going through this whole exercise, but the answer is yeah. I mean, for me, the biggest struggle, like, I have an addictive personality, and I've been fortunate. I've never really been addicted to anything other than food. I think that's my addiction, 100%.
can you visualize the same situation where you don't choose the Cheez-Its?
Yeah, and I do. I mean, most of the time now at this stage in the game, because I'm about, like I said, almost. So I'm about. This is the seventh week. So I feel like when we talk about habits, right? Because I've done a lot of things that where I changed my habits. I feel like I'm getting into a groove, but I also have fear, which I talk a lot about, that I'm not going to get there, and that part scares me.
Okay. So everything that you have set up right now is perfect. The only thing where we talk about getting out, the answer to getting out of that negative feedback loop is, number one, we have to create space between the thought or the feeling and the behavior.
Yeah.
And it's just having like a mental rule with yourself of, if I want to go eat these Cheez-Its, I'm going to allow myself to do that. But I'm going to create a 5-minute window. It doesn't have to be 5 minutes, whatever rule you want to set for yourself. It can be 10 seconds. It can be 30 seconds. It can be 5 minutes. It can be 15 minutes. But you set a gap between, I have the thought, I have the feeling, and there's the action, and we're going to create space. Within that space, number one, it's really helpful to get out of whatever environment you're in. If you're in the kitchen, get out of the kitchen. If you're in the bedroom, get out of the bedroom. Change your environment. It'll change the way that your brain thinks about the situation. The second thing that you want to do is, you've already visualized yourself making the choice that's in alignment. So, there's this whole idea of manifestation. Manifestation has been not backed by any sort of legitimate research, but there is research that suggests that we can visualize choice points in our journey when it's going to get hard. And I told you, like, most people think about the finish line. They think about the fantasy of the end product. What they don't think about is those choice points, those forks in the road, where it does, you're at dinner with a bunch of friends and everybody's ordering dessert. And you're like, you know what, screw it, I'll have dessert too. When you're competing and you need to stay really dialed in, you may have to think about that situation and what would I do instead? So during that gap, you want to come back to some of the visualization that you've already done with those choice points. You also want to revisit why it matters to you. Because you kind of already went through, like, hey, I'm doing this to prove something to myself. I want to see how far I can take it. And I want to prove all the naysayers wrong. I want to say, look, I did do this. You told me that wasn't a good idea. I couldn't do it. And look, I showed up and still did it. So we kind of go through this mental exercise of, we create the space, and then we're just kind of going through this checklist to get your prefrontal cortex to take control of the situation. And you can also recognize, you can pull from past experience to be like, how did I feel the last time that I ate the cookies, the Cheez-Its, or whatever the food is? I was like, you know what? I actually didn't like how I felt afterwards. So we can pull from past experience.
And you usually don't, right? That's the thing too. And man, this is so awesome. Again, if you're listening right now, man, I hope this is helpful for you. And we're talking a lot about nutrition and health and wellness, but all this stuff that, Mike is coaching me on, helps with pretty much everything. I mean, I know it does. And the other thing is as I'm listening to you, I'm taking notes, right? For more questions, but also I love that, man. I love that gap thing, because I find myself, I think a lot of people do too, just having that mental battle. Like you said, there's two brains where we're like, I know 100%. And by the way, the scenario, the cookie scenario, man, again, I can't wait to go back and actually watch this. Or I never do that. I'm going to go back to, but, you have the cookie and you're thinking about it, and then you eat it. And then, like you said, it's never as satisfying as you think. So then you have another one, and I keep doing that. And now I kind of know why, which is weird, because I mean, I know why, but I think you just drove it home for me to hear it early from someone else, because I've read it, before, and I've watched other stuff. But for you to say that, it's so powerful. Listen, again, if you're like me, I think you probably are, like a lot of people are. Again, if you want some more information about Mike, you can just go visit him on Instagram. I'm gonna make sure I spell it right this time. It's Coach_Mike _MILLNER. He's got about 40,000 followers on there. He's pretty active. And he's posting stuff, every single day. And again, if you'd like some more information about him, what he's doing, if you just listen to our little coaching session, and then maybe you're going to see me in some of the after photos, he's definitely going to be a part of that. So again, go to visit him on Instagram. From there, he's got a website. And also he's got an app that he's coming out with as well. Depending on when you hear this, it may have already been out, but the app is pretty cool as well. So again, Coach_Mike _MILLNER. So, let's talk about, and this is why the diet industry is so big. I don't know if you also know. So my whole business, or the businesses that I built, has been in the health and wellness space, mostly nutritional supplements, right? I know that you can see you got supplements in your background. I want to talk to you a little bit about that as well at some point. But let's talk about when you screw up. Okay. So I think a lot of people, and I think this is where I am a little bit different. When I screw up, I might have a little bit of self-loathing, but I usually don't stay there. I usually say, all right, well, you fucked up. Let's go. Let's fix it. Why do so many people, when they screw up, stay there?
Yeah, it kind of goes back to just what we were talking about before. The biggest emotional feeling, or the strongest emotional feeling, is guilt and shame, and a lot of people don't know what to do with that. And again, it's funny because if you take like warning signs on cigarettes, and it's like, smoking can kill you, for lack of a better phrase, but that's effectively what it's saying.
Sure.
Smokers will look at that, and it actually accomplishes the goal of scaring them. So if a smoker, and this is all studies that I'm quoting here, so this is not just me hypothesizing, but smokers will report actually being fearful of the warning, being like, oh my God, this is literally killing me. The problem is that fear and the emotions that they're dealing with, they turn to the thing that they know how to turn to, which is smoking. So their processing of emotions is handled through smoking. And it's the same thing with people who overindulge, when they binge, or they have the cookie and then they feel guilty, or they hear something like, eating sugar is killing you. And they're like, oh my God, I'm eating so much sugar and it's literally killing me. The fear or the guilt or the shame makes them turn to more food or more cigarettes or whatever it is that they're struggling with. And if you don't know how to process those emotions, if you don't know how to turn to curiosity and acceptance of those feelings, and this is kind of a big part of what we talk about, because at the end of the day, nobody's perfect. It's just unreasonable to think that you're going to go through this journey in a linear fashion. There's always going to be setbacks. There's always going to be tough days. There's going to be times where you make decisions that you wish you hadn't. The key is understanding what to do with that emotional state, what I call ride the wave. Like, you need to practice and learn the skill of riding an emotional wave, because what happens to a wave, it inevitably crashes and dissipates and goes away. That's what emotions are. They're temporary, they're fleeting. So if we can train ourselves to approach that with self-compassion and acceptance, like, yeah, I am feeling this way, but you know what? My feelings, number one, don't dictate my behaviors. My thoughts are not necessarily fact. And those are two things that every human has to come to realize if they want to make progress. My thoughts are not fact, and my feelings don't have to dictate my behaviors. So if I'm feeling guilty, if I'm feeling fearful, if I'm feeling shame, can I turn that to acceptance? This is just a feeling that I'm having. Let me ride this out before I do anything. I'm not going to take any action, because I don't have to immediately act on an emotion. I'm just going to let the wave crash and dissipate. And now I can act with curiosity of, why did I make that decision? And how can I make a better decision in the future? Once that emotion and that wave crashes, now I can come from a place of acknowledgement, acceptance, and now I get to choose the appropriate behavior of what comes next. And that's always going to be the most important thing. What you do after the fact is always more important to the overall end result than what you did in that moment. It's okay if you had the cookie. It's okay if you had the Cheez-Its. It's how you respond, not getting caught up in that negative feedback loop where it kind of perpetuates more poor decisions. And then you end up in a, 2-week or 2-month spiral. And then you pick yourself up on New Year's and say, I need to start over.
Man, I'm listening to you. I'm like, and I keep saying how smart you are. Do you have your PhD? Because if you don't, you should probably go get it, because it sounds like you're pretty damn close. What about you hear this all the time with addiction, right? And in my book, 5% More, I talk, my whole family is just full of addicts, and everyone kind of knows my story. And I've been pretty lucky, I guess, right, and not being addicted to heroin like some of my family members. But what about the process by which people replace one habit with another, right? So actually tomorrow for me, man, I got all sorts of milestones that are like kind of important to our conversation. Tomorrow for me, it'll be 3 years that I haven't drank a drop of alcohol. For me, again, the decision was my own. I didn't tell anybody. Honestly, like if you had to give a definition of alcoholism, I've seen them. I think I would probably fall into the category of like a binge drinker, which would be considered an alcoholic. But I was never the type. I didn't drink every day. I didn't yearn for alcohol. I didn't need. I didn't want. I just woke up one morning. I was like, that's it. I can't. I'm done. Right. That was 3 years ago, and tomorrow. However, and I've never put a drug in my body. Never smoked a cigarette. But I did discover THC like gummies as a result of because we sold CBD, and I tried it, and I like it. I don't smoke or anything like that, but I just try like gummies. And for me, that actually I do pretty frequently, actually. But what are your thoughts on like replacing one habit with another, and and being able to kind of balance within your own psyche, what's good and what's bad? Because there's also the other ones where, again, I know a ton of addicts where they'll and it's almost kind of like what I'm doing a little bit right now, where I'm becoming obsessed with the gym, right? Like I don't want to leave anymore, like, which I've never had that before. I've never not wanted to leave. Now I just don't want to leave. I've been there sometimes. You don't need to be there 5 hours, but sometimes I just am, because it is a good feeling. So what are your thoughts on replacing one habit with another? I mean, first of all, do most people do that? Is that normal, or I don't even know?
It's actually a solid strategy for kind of what we were talking about before. When you do have something that is creating that negative feedback loop, or you have a situation that keeps coming up, that choice point, that friction point, the fork in the road, however you want to frame it, it's actually really helpful to think about what else could I do instead in that situation, and try it and see how that feels, instead of immediately going for the ice cream or the cookie, or immediately going for the drink or the cigarette. Is there something that we can replace it with? Is there something else that we can do instead? It doesn't always guarantee that that's going to stick, but it is a really solid strategy to come up with a different outlet, because the behavior itself, there's any habit, it starts with a trigger. Then there's the behavior, then there's the reward at the end. And that's how the feedback loop happens that instills a habit. So, you might find that there's a certain smell, or there's a certain room, or there's a certain chair that creates this urge to do something. Like every time I sit in this chair in my house, I pour a glass of wine, and it's almost like mindless. And people might have that feeling. And number one, you can change the environment. So you can get rid of the chair. Sometimes it's a matter of just putting the food, let's say it's a candy bowl, like putting it out of sight. So you can do that, but it's also helpful to say, every time I sit in this chair, that's the trigger. The chair physically sitting in this chair is the trigger. Then the behavior is pouring a glass of wine. Is there something else I could pour instead? Is there something else I could drink instead that would give me that same habit, that same feedback loop, but not one, like if you're trying to cut back on drinking, but not one that has alcohol in it. And then, the reward is I completed the feedback loop, even though it's not giving you the feedback loop of alcohol. You've completed the cycle. And even something as simple as like checking, so you could use a check mark in your phone, like on your notes, like, did I accomplish this? And you actually put a little check mark emoji. Something as simple as that will actually trigger that complete dopamine cycle of completing the task. For some reason, our brain likes that like finalized version of the thing that we're doing. It needs the trigger, it needs the behavior, it needs the reward. The reward could be you mark it off in your calendar as complete, you check it off in your phone as complete. So you absolutely can replace a habit with something that's more productive. It does take time, and it may not give you the same immediate response that you're used to getting with whatever it is that we're trying to replace. But that's why it's helpful to think about those things ahead of time and have one or two options. It's like, the next time I feel this way, this is what I'm going to try instead. I'm going to try the THC gummy, or I'm going to try a non-alcoholic. Maybe I'm going to pour a non-alcoholic wine or beer or whatever. There's plenty of replacements out there that you could try instead, and see how it feels. And it might be something that sticks, and it might not. And you might have to go to plan B or C or D and keep working through that process.
As I'm listening to that too, and again, I know we mentioned supplements, and I see a supplement, behind you. And I think I know, because I've been selling supplements for 20 years, people especially in this country, we're looking for the instant gratification, right? You'd mentioned that earlier. We have a problem. We want to seek out a pill pot or a potion that's going to just make it all better for us. But just then you were just talking about it's a process. Like you might not find it right away, right? And I think that, I don't know, you tell me, that's why I think a lot of people might just fail or just go back to it, because they know if they go back to smoking that cigarette, they will have that instant gratification. At least I don't know. That's what I think. What do you say to those people who are looking for that instant thing? It's not going to be instant. Right? It's just going to take time.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you have to talk through. Ultimately, if you have a conversation with somebody who finds themselves gravitating towards the instant, the quick fix, if you have a logical, rational conversation with that person, they know that that's not the answer. We can pull from past experience. We can pull from, hey, how many times have you been on a diet? And, people that we work with, they say, 20, 30 years. And then it's like, yeah, I'm still thinking about doing this, 30-day, 20-pound challenge or whatever. And it's like, let's talk about that. I get it. It's hard when you're in pain, when your current situation is not where you want to be. It's an uncomfortable feeling. And the appeal of fixing it in 30 days or less it definitely triggers that dopamine response. It's like, I want this now. But if you actually get them to talk through it, say, yeah, I know, deep down, I've been down this road before. I can pull from the science of hindsight and say, the last time I tried something like this, yeah, I lost a couple pounds, but then I gained it all back and I was back at square one. And what do you really want? And that's going back to what is really the most important to you? Where do you want to go? What does success look like to you? And why does that matter? Who else does it matter? Like, you can pull, there was a study that was done on smokers that talked about making their kids proud. And when that was the driving force, they were way more likely to follow through on quitting when they thought about it from the lens of, my kids are going to be so proud of me when they know that I quit smoking. So you can pull from things like that to say, like, aren't your kids going to be so much more proud of you when you actually know how to eat and fuel your body well, and you're healthy, and you're able to, and you're not on these quick fix diets, these fad programs. You're not always seeking instant gratification. So it's just kind of walking through the underlying reasons. Why does that sound so appealing to you? Help them understand that. And then what do you truly want? And what does that look like? And would it be worth it if I said, you know what, it's going to take you a year for you to really have these habits in place and the lifestyle that you want and the body that you want? It's going to take you a year. Is that going to be worth it to you? Most people would say, yeah, especially if it comes with the attachment of, I never have to go back. It's not that I'm going to lose the weight and I have to worry about it coming back on, which is what happens when most people diet. 95 to 97% of people who lose weight will gain it back, sometimes plus interest. So if I say, you're going to get there in a year, but you're never going to gain it back, would you take that deal? Most people will say yes. And then it's just having that constant, really going through this process of understanding those emotional triggers, understanding how to ride the waves of your emotions, and understanding that you're still going to have bad days. You're still going to make poor decisions. That's not what really matters. We're just trying to make more decisions overall in alignment with the person that you want to become. That's a whole other rabbit hole that we can go down, is getting really familiar with the future version of yourself. Most people treat the future version of themselves like a total stranger. And if you say to somebody, how many times you're going to work out this week? They'll say, oh, maybe 3 times this week. And let's say they only made it 2 times. And you're like, well, you couldn't stay consistent with 3 times. What about next week? What about a month from now? How many times per week are you going to work out? They'll say, oh, I'll get to the gym 5-6 days a week. We treat that future version of us like they're somehow a different person that's going to make better decisions. And this has been repeated in research as well. So you have to get really familiar with that future version of you and understand that if you're making a poor decision now, the future version of you is going to make the same poor decision. So when the next week rolls around, you're still going to miss that day at the gym, just like you did this day. So it's recognizing that we are the same person. That person is not a stranger. That person is not a superhero. It's still you. So I'm going to make the decision now, because then I have more proof in the future that I can stay consistent with 3 days a week. And then maybe I can go to 4 days a week. And then maybe I can go to 5 days a week, because I am basically fortifying that future version of me instead of just treating them like a totally different person who's somehow going to swoop in and save the day.
Wow, man, boy, I hope you have a little bit more time because I've got a bunch more questions for you. Again, make sure you're checking this guy out. It'll obviously be in the notes, but again, it's Coach_Mike_Millner on Instagram. That's where he's pretty active. You can find all of his stuff there. We'll talk a little bit about it. He's got an app that may or may not already be out by the time you hear this. Change of environment, again, man, this is like so for me personally, this is like so relevant. I was talking to my therapist about this, about they call it something, and maybe it's called change of environment, where a lot of people think that if they do just up and move somewhere, that things are just going to get better, and that's a fantasy. But so I went down to Florida for, I don't know, 4 days with my daughter. And I knew that when I was going down there, that it would be less likely for me to cheat on the diet, because I knew we were staying like an Airbnb, so we had like a condo, whatever. I knew that I was going to buy the food, and I just knew that the other food, the stuff that's kind of in my house now, it just wouldn't be there. So it was really easy for me to be there. But also mentally, I think also because maybe it's kind of dreary here in Massachusetts, that the vitamin D and the sun and all that stuff. Does change of environment really work for people?
Yeah, what research shows us is that the change of environment can be really beneficial for those subconscious choices that you're making that may not be helpful. So if every time, I actually just spoke with somebody the other day, every time I'm a healthcare worker, and every time during the holiday season, there's just like candy everywhere. And there's a bowl left on my desk. And every time I pass it, I just grab a piece of chocolate. I'm not even thinking about it. It's like just a mindless, I grab the chocolate, I throw it in my mouth, and I keep going on about my day. And it's every single time I pass that desk. And what we know is that if you just increase the amount of friction, and this is a great concept that is in the book Atomic Habits by James Clear, which really helps to break down habit formation and how that all works. But if there's more friction between you and the bad habit, you're less likely to follow through with it. And if there's less friction between you and the good habit you're trying to create, then you're more likely to follow through. So
that's the gap. That's the gap that you're talking about, essentially, right?
Exactly. So we can establish an environment that's more conducive to success, as easy as you can make it for yourself to follow through on, let's say, going to the gym. Maybe that means you lay out your clothes already the night before. Let's say you've got it set in your calendar, whatever you need to do to make it as simple as possible. Or if there's a bad habit you're trying to break, you don't want to grab the candy every time you walk by, just take the bowl and put it in your desk drawer. Instead of sitting on your desk where it's in clear sight, it's mindless, it's subconscious. So every time you pass it, you don't see it. Now there's just a little bit more friction between you and the habit that you're trying to break. If you are somebody who at night, you just have this habit, you go into the freezer, you grab some ice cream. If you take the ice cream and you put it away, like let's say your subconscious just gets you into this mindless, I grab the container of ice cream and like, I'm about to go grab the spoon. And before I do that, I'm just going to put it away for a second. I'm going to close the freezer. I'm going to leave the room. I'm going to take that, let's call it 10 seconds. I'm just going to count out loud to 10. I'm going to be in a different room. And then I'm going to say to myself, do I really want to go back into the kitchen and grab that ice cream? Most of the time you will say no. And if you say yes, go for it. Allow yourself permission to still follow through. As long as it's coming from a mindful, conscious choice, you're much more equipped to not feel the guilt, to not feel the shame, to not go into that negative feedback loop. If you're like, you know what, this is actually what I want, I'm going to go back in there and I'm going to enjoy it. Totally fine. The goal is that we just get out of the environment so that it's not a mindless subconscious action, that we're bringing it to the forefront of conscious thought.
Wow, man, I know we don't have a ton of time, but give us, and I want to get into your app in a second, but give us some examples of some of your success stories. I know you've been working with people, all over the country, I think even all over the world. Give me an example of like a recent success story, if you could, of somebody that you've been working with and in whatever capacity. I'd love to just kind of hear that story.
Yeah. So the one that comes to mind most recently, we have a client who is currently down 80 pounds. And while the number itself is impressive, it's more so all of the stuff that she has going on in her life. She's a chief marketing officer, manages a ton of employees, is married, has a kid, has to hold down the household, is one of those people that's just pulled in a million different directions. Not only that, but she's going through some family hardship, and her mother is very sick. And that has been like the biggest challenge, is going through the grieving process and recognizing that, her life may never be the same. She's turned to food quite frequently. So we've literally been working on exactly what we're talking about, is the emotional processing, the acceptance and self-compassion versus the guilt and shame. So through all of the busyness at work, through the family stuff, through her personal life, she's still been able to continue with her weight loss journey. And she felt like she was one of those people who was so type A that she just felt like, I already know everything. I can do it on my own. And being able to ask for help was a big deal. So just getting her, into our program and working with our team was a huge step. And the results have been, pretty remarkable. Her transformation is amazing. But she would be the first to say the physical results pale in comparison to what it's done to her mental well-being and the confidence in being able to go through something like she is in her family life and in her personal life, knowing that she has the tools to not let that pull her down and get her back into a dark place, or turning to food all the time, or, any sort of self-sabotage that she used to fall into, because she had a long history of self-sabotage and trying quick fix diets and then gaining all the weight back. And so she's definitely a recent success story that I'm, pretty proud of.
I mean, 80 pounds, that's a big number. So people go to your Instagram. Again, it's coach_Mike_Millner. They want to work with you. Let's walk us through like how does it work? How do people work with you? Do they have to fill out a form? Like, how does it all work?
Yeah, so it's by application only, just because we know who we are for and we know who we're not for. We have a really high success rate just because we are pretty selective about who we work for and don't just take anybody. And I mean that if I have, if we have a consultation call, that's the process. Is you fill out an application, you have a consultation call. As much as we want to make sure that we're the right fit for you, we also want to make sure you're the right fit for us.
Is there a cost involved with that consultation call?
The consultation call is totally free.
Okay. All right. Great.
It's really just getting to know the individual and what their situation looks like, and are we the best fit? If not, I would point somebody in the right direction, and I would say, you know what, I don't think that we're the best fit for you, but here's who I recommend you talking to, or here's just what I recommend you doing in the meantime. Cause I do this quite frequently. I'll just give somebody, a couple week action plan, and let's see how this goes over the next 2 weeks. I don't think that you quite are ready for our one-on-one program, but do this for me over the next couple of weeks and then report back. So if we end up deciding that it's good fit, everything we do is very high touch. It's highly personalized. There's no cookie cutter way of doing things. It's really getting to know your personality, your lifestyle, your family dynamics, your goals, your diet history. We want to look at your current metabolic state. There's a lot of things that go into creating a truly personal. A lot of companies out there, programs out there talk about personalization. My opinion is that we take it to the next level of personalization, and that's why our success rate is so high.
So the metabolic state. Let me ask that, because I'm having my body fat done again tomorrow, and I did it on one of those scales where you're holding on to electrodes on the feet and the hands, and it gave me the feedback of my metabolic rate. I think I'm at it was like 2,100 calories again. And he explained it to me, if I did nothing, if I just laid there in bed, I'd be burning 2,100 calories. He said that was pretty good. I don't know. I also, the whole thing, my visceral fat, all that. So I'm really excited to see kind of where I'm at. I was at 25% body fat. I'm pretty sure I'm under 20 now, being 7 weeks in. So I'm really interested. But so the metabolic rate, which one, just explain what that is, and two, how does someone do that if they're working with you virtually? Do you send them somewhere, or how does that work?
Yeah, so there's a couple ways to go about it. We can actually just look at diet. We can just make a prediction based off of diet history, current intake, current activity level, look at what they're currently doing, and come up with a prediction of where is your metabolism relative to where we think it should be. So to your point, the metabolic rate, we want to know your resting energy expenditure, or your BMR, basically what does your body require in terms of calories and energy to just keep the lights on if you did nothing at all, to support your organs, your heart, your blood flow. And then we have other things that make up our metabolism, which would be like our activity throughout the day, things like walking. It would be our exercise, our intentional exercise. And then also there's the thermic effect of food. So actually eating and digesting food requires energy. So we kind of look at those 4 components as your total daily energy expenditure. Looking at your metabolism is effectively a stress barometer. Most people think of it as a calorie calculator. It's more accurately described as a stress barometer. Your metabolism will look at inputs and outputs of stress from your internal and external environment, and it will come up with, this is what we need to do from a hormone standpoint, from a calorie standpoint, from an energy standpoint. And it's just making these computations based off of the signals that you're sending it. So an example, if I am sending the signal of I need to keep my muscle, and that signal would be I'm lifting weights, I'm actually using my muscle, I'm eating enough protein, then my metabolism registers that as, hey, this tissue, this muscle tissue is really important. So we're going to expend a lot of energy keeping it there. And muscle is a calorically expensive tissue to keep on your body, meaning you burn more calories at rest, the more muscle you have. The more protein you're consuming, the more calories you're going to burn through that process. So that would be an example where we can actually improve your metabolic rate by increasing muscle mass or increasing protein, or even how many total calories you're consuming. Now, if you're sending a different signal, if you're sending a signal of, hey, we don't have a lot of energy coming in because we're not consuming a lot of calories, and I'm not lifting weights, so we don't need this muscle, your body's going to be like, okay, well, there's no point in carrying around this expensive tissue. Let's break this down. And that's where some people end up looking skinny fat, because they lose their muscle, their metabolism is down regulating. That's not a great place to be, because you become more efficient with calories, meaning you're not burning as many calories at rest. And your calorie requirements are going down. I like to eat food. So I want my metabolism to be a little bit more effective than that, where I can eat more food without gaining fat. I think a lot of people look at it as, how little do I have to eat to lose weight? I like to look at it as, how much can I eat without gaining weight? Because once we come from that perspective, then all of a sudden the fat loss equation becomes really simple.
What do you say to the people though? And they say, well, I have a genetic predisposition of, my metabolism is slow. I have a slow metabolism. Before you answer that, just on a side note, I was watching 60 Minutes and I couldn't believe what was being essentially the propaganda, which was, they had this woman on, I don't know if you saw it, where she went on to say that and I'm sure it's somehow propped up by the drug companies, that obesity is in fact a disease. There's no way to control it, no matter what you do. Your body is your body and your brain is your brain. And therefore, if your weight is this, it's just going to be that way forever, no matter what you do. And I'm like, I know enough about that to say that's total bullshit. There may be some people like that, but you should watch it. It was gross, because I just know that that's not the case. All right, now to get off my soapbox. What do you say to the people who say, oh, well, I'm just, it's in my genetics. I have a slow metabolism genetically. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So there can be, genetic predisposition to anything. And that just means that you may be just like everything in life, you may be starting from a different point. Life is not designed where we're all starting from the same starting line and we're all finishing at the same finish line. There's some people that do have a genetic advantage, or there's some people that have a genetic disadvantage. And that can vary depending on what we're talking about. If it's the ability to put on muscle, yes, there will absolutely be some people who are just genetically predisposed to putting on muscle easier than others. Same thing with losing body fat. You may be genetically predisposed to losing body fat easier than other people. But what I will say is, the more research that we see on genetics and epigenetics, we have way more control than we think. And that number keeps getting higher. Every time I see new research on how much do genetics actually play a role, that number keeps going down. It's like, we used to say it was 50% of the equation. Now we say it's 20% of the equation. And literally, the more that we see how much we can change our gene expressions, how much control we really have by our actions and our habits, and our thoughts and our beliefs, my feeling is you could either take the stance of why even bother, Or you can say, I'm going to control what I can. I'm going to do the best that I can. And I'm going to see how far I can take it to feel my best, to perform my best, to live my best. Your metabolism in particular is adaptive and reactive. So even if your genetics are, really the worst and you have a terribly slow metabolism, you can still improve it from there. There is no such thing as a stagnant metabolism. It doesn't exist. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to survive. Your body's primary focal point is survival. So in order to do that, we need an adaptive system. So that's why if there's not a lot of calories coming in, your body will downregulate, because it's not great to have a roaring fast metabolism when you're starving to death. That would make the death happen quicker. So we downregulate to keep ourselves alive. The bottom line is there's a lot that we control. My favorite line about genetics is that genetics load the gun, but your actions and habits pull the trigger. So you get to decide what you do with it. If you want to just say, this is the hand I was dealt, oh, well, poor me, that's fine. But my preference is taking more of an empowered approach and saying there's a lot of things that I can do and I can control, and I'm going to see how far I can take it.
Wow, man, I can talk to you forever. Unfortunately, when we can't do that, I don't have to, I'm glad I have your number, but I can text you and ask you for advice. Before I let you go, you are about to release an app that helps people with a lot of this stuff. I have an app now that I'm helping me. There's apps everywhere that can help people. I'm using one right now to help kind of track my calories and stuff like that. What's the name of your app? What is it going to do for people? If those listening now, how do they get it?
Yeah, so it's going to be the name of my company, which is Peak Optimization Performance, or POP for short. It will all be, if you guys follow me on Instagram, at Coach_Mike_Millner, I'll release everything there where they can get the link to download it. And, we can do like a free trial. It will include everything from customized nutrition to training to the mindset and the behavioral psychology that we do. That's all going to be built into the app. And that's really going to be the focal point, because you mentioned you can get a calorie counting app anywhere. Ours will be integrated where you can do all of your tracking and logging through our app. You can log all of your workouts through our app. The real differentiator is we're taking all of the behavioral psychology that actually works for body and mind transformation, and we're putting that into the app for anybody who's in our coaching programs. We have different levels of service that will be through the app. We'll have a training only platform. We'll have a training and nutrition, and then we'll have our full integrated one-on-one experience. So that will all be within the app itself.
Wow. Again, we talked earlier, I don't know if we were recording or not, online or offline, but guys, I've been selling health and wellness products for a long time. I've met a lot of different people, doctors, bodybuilders, nutritionists, PhDs within this world. For those of you who also know, I'm also an attorney that kind of was played in this space for a long time, in the health and wellness space. And this guy really knows his stuff, obviously, because I've been grilling him with a lot of questions. Again, because a lot of my personal stuff that I wanted to know. So these are the types of people like Mike that we like to have here on the Alden Report. People that are doing stuff, people that have done stuff, and people that really know their stuff, right? And so it's obvious, if you've listened to this point, this guy really knows his stuff. And he's been doing it for a long time, and he's been helping people. He's helped me. I'm so glad that he was able to come on today. And earlier, I apologize because I was late and I had to postpone, but I'm so glad. I think there's always a reason for that, man. There's always a reason why this stuff happens, So again, we've been on with Mike Millner. If you want to up-level your game, man, like if you just want to make that change, I think we all have changes that we want to make. This is the type of guy that you want to talk to. He's been doing it for a while, like I mentioned. So if you go to his Instagram, it's Coach_Mike_Millner, Millner. Even look at his Instagram. It's very well organized, and you can just tell it's very intentional, the things that he's doing. And I think that's what we need to do, right? If we want to change our habits, we need to be intentional with it. So again, you'd like more information, check him out on Instagram. We'll be in the notes as well. And then lastly, again, if you've made it to this point, which I hopefully you have, make sure you like, follow, subscribe, do all that stuff you're supposed to do. Support us on Patreon. It's the first time we've ever done this. We've had this podcast now for almost 8 years. We don't push out a lot of volume. We push out a lot of quality. And so that's why we're doing this. And then we're continuing to help people just like Mike. Yeah, my name is Mike Alden. That's Mike Millner. And we'll see you soon.
I'm super excited about our latest program. Look, we've been on television for close to 20 years, literally selling hundreds of millions of dollars with products and services that have had a positive impact on people's lives. We've created millionaires. If you've ever watched television, you've most likely seen me on television, not dressed like this, but in a suit and a tie. Listen, we've re-engineered the process. We're allowing people, a small group of people, whether you're an author, whether you're a business coach, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you have a program or a service that you feel as though that can have a positive impact on people's lives, and you want to up level your game. You know, you're tired of what's going on social media. You're tired of AI is not kicking in. You're tired of all the money that you spent and you're not seeing any return. You're tired of all these fraudsters out there that tell you they're going to put you in Huffington Post or USA Today or Forbes, and it's nothing just but a joke. You want to be in front of millions of people every single day all over the country. Folks, we've been doing it for 20 years. We've re-engineered the process. We've made it possible for the average everyday person to participate in this. If you want to up-level your game, if you truly want to build your profile, if you truly want to get in front of millions of people every single day, send me a direct message at Mike Alden 2012. You'll see it on the bottom of the screen, at Mike Alden 2012, and put TV in the message, and I will get back to you personally and see if you're a good fit for us. Again, send me a direct message at Mike Alden 2012. Send me the message TV, and we'll see if you're a good fit.